Welcome everyone to the SCOR BPM Accelerator Powered by ARIS webinar. My name is Melinda Sprang and I'm Director of Corporate Programs for APICS. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a couple of details. At the end of the presentation, we'll save some time for questions and answers. On the right toolbar on your screen, you'll see the questions box. To ask a question at any time during the presentation, type it in the box and click send. We will answer as many as possible today, and all remaining questions will be answered by email. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and the link will be emailed to everyone as well as posted on the APICS website. If you experience any technical difficulties today, please go to webinar support by calling country code 1-805-617-7000. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Peter Bolstorff, Executive Vice President of Corporate Development for APICS. Peter oversees the APICS for Business value proposition that includes supply chain talent development and corporate supply chain performance. He is also author of the book Supply Chain Excellence, a handbook for dramatic improvement using the SCOR model, and brings over 25 years of experience in supply chain and operations management to his position. And now I will turn the presentation over to Peter.
Thank you, Melinda, and welcome everybody. Whether it's day or night or morning, we appreciate the fact that we know you have more to do than time, so we'll get right to it. So this webinar has three main objectives. The first one is to illustrate some key concepts in best practice SCOR implementation, and so we assume some level of SCOR understanding. We also like to discuss some of the challenges for process managers and centers of excellence. And then I'm excited to introduce a demonstration of the features and benefits of APICS, one of APICS' first software products called the SCOR BPM Accelerator Powered by ARIS. As Melinda alluded to, we will reserve some time at the end for questions and answers. So APICS at a glance, I think the important piece here is APICS is the largest professional association in the world. We have over 47,000 individual members. In 2014, we merged with the Supply Chain Council. And with that merger, we got 5,000 companies that have used SCOR since it was first introduced in 1996. That gives APICS a unique perspective of supply chain excellence at both the individual point of view as well as the organizational. If we look at our best of the best companies that have used SCOR, we have illustrated a common platform that we observe those companies employing on their journey. The key point of this slide is that regardless of where a company starts in performance and metrics or organization and strategy or process or people, we know that the journey encompasses going all the way around. And in fact, some of our best of the best have been employing SCOR for over 10 years and have over 30 rotations. So for today's webinar and our SCOR BPM product, we're going to focus on the process component of the platform. Hopefully, most people on the webinar have seen this picture in one way, shape, or form. It's probably the most common one that you would find in the academic journals. SCOR is a global standard in defining supply chain: plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable from supplier to customer's customer. As you'll see, SCOR has 4 dimensions. It has a process dimension, it has a performance dimension, it has a practices dimension, and a people dimension. And by using the ARIS platform, we have made SCOR alive in the new digital platform. One of the things that APICS does annually is to do a survey of its over 250 SCOR company users. And the question is, what are the common set of motivations that you're using to launch a SCOR project or a SCOR program? I think there are two in the top 6 that are worth noting. The first is number 3. There's been a continued focus and an actual increase in the priority of defining and building effective and efficient supply chain organizations, which includes roles and responsibilities as it relates to process. New to the top 6 list is the globalizing and managing business processes, and then in the other notables, optimizing existing technology investments, mostly focused on ERP and migration of functionality from or into the cloud. Along with the idea of the platform is how do we use SCOR to actually identify a list of things that we want to improve. So when you look at the top 50 or the best of the best SCOR users, they use a very common implementation roadmap, which includes how do we engage with the business unit, how do we define a project, how do we analyze, which includes performance, practices, process, and people, how do we put that list of things together in terms of a portfolio of improvement, and then how do we launch. I think one of the things that we'll see around centers of excellence is, in the big challenges, is how do we engage, because it's rare that a center of excellence will go around this racetrack. Most always, the center of excellence have to engage with the business unit and then shoulder to shoulder walk through the roadmap. We do know that companies that, the best of the best companies that go around that racetrack generate value, both at an operating income level as well as on other key indices. We also know that those companies that do this over the long term, 5 to 10 year period of time, rank in the upper quartile of their industry group. I think part of the thing that we've observed for global process management is in the typical results first bullet. We know that if companies who tend to exhibit higher maturity in global process management tend to be able to implement systems faster and get more functionality out of the go-live situation. The 5 challenges that we see for the supply chain center of excellence or for process management that we've had feedback on that the SCOR BPM Accelerator is aiming to help with is trying to establish the link between the business unit value, so what is global process management going to do for me, and the actual discipline of managing a process globally. A second challenge is really the governance, policy, and some of the enable documentation and discipline. A third challenge would be how do we measure process at our performance at a process level, and then actually focus on how do we improve processes for return on investment. Fourth challenge that we find commonly within our Center of Excellence engagements with our corporations is the idea of synchronizing process requirements and capabilities with system functionality. And I think that points back to the metric where by doing an effective job of managing your processes globally, we can get faster implementations with better functionality utilization out of the go live. The last challenge is the idea between linking process capability with the individual performer knowledge, skill, experience, and aptitude, especially as we start to see the explosion of advanced analytics tools and some of the other higher technical things that you'd find with the Internet of Things and other supply chain inputs. How do you make sure that the people performing the process work have the knowledge, skill, experience, and aptitudes to do the job? And so with the idea of a SCOR, what a SCOR best practice implementation or utilization looks like, and these challenges for our centers of excellence in supply chain, I am proud to introduce Harry Hetrick, Director of Client Solutions for Visual Enterprise Architecture. VEA is our strategic development partner in the SCOR BPM Accelerator. And without further ado, Harry is going to get straight away into the demonstration of some of the key functionalities of the BPM. Harry, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Yeah, once again, thanks, Peter. I'm Harry Hetrick, Director of Client Solutions at VEA. We're very excited to be working with the APICS SCOR organization. What you're viewing here is the SCOR reference model in the ARIS Connect product. ARIS Connect is a product provided by Software AG. Okay, so let me jump into this. This is the main navigation model for the reference, for this SCOR reference model. Okay, a little bit about some of the objects on the screen here from an ARIS perspective. Okay, so these are symbols or objects in ARIS. There's an icon in the lower right-hand corner. That's what we call an assignment icon in ARIS. Okay, what that means is there's additional detail behind this object where I can drill down and navigate. Okay, the other thing is on the left-hand panel here, there's a navigation folder structure. So I can also navigate via clicking on model links over there. And I'll be doing both of those things throughout the demonstration today. Okay, so let me drill down on the process first. Okay, which is the first dimension here. A window comes up. It says select a diagram. So I have 3 different levels of the SCOR process framework here. Okay, of additional details. So I'll pick level 1 initially. Okay, so let me blow this up a little bit. So this is the plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable, the main processes. If you notice here, there's an assignment icon here, so that means there's additional detail. So I will navigate or drill down on this one. Okay, it opens up the level 1 model. Okay, P1 through P5. Okay, I'll continue to drill down on the plan. So the plan supply chain. Okay, so the diagram, the select diagram comes up here. I have 2 different diagrams attached. I have what they call the P1, plan supply chain, function allocation diagram. So that's an ARIS model. And what this model describes is the practices and the metrics associated with the plan supply chain process. Okay. The second model is what we call evaluated chain in ARIS, and this describes the process flow of the level 3s. So let's jump into the first one. Okay, so very busy model here. At this level, there's lots of objects. Okay, so let me scroll over to the right just to kind of give you an idea of the size. So these are going to be the metrics, performance metrics, and on the left are the practices. So I'll scroll down and we'll look at the legend. Okay, so we have a process object. I have the turquoise of the metric. I have practices, emerging practice, standard, and best practice. If you notice the symbols up here, okay, so this is the emerging practices for the process. We have the standard practices and then the best practices. Okay, the skill and the process input-output are not used on this level, so we'll talk about those in later on in the demonstration when we look at the level 3 model. Okay, so just to kind of give you an overview, right? So here's your practices, the process, the metrics. Okay, so let's take a look at one of the practices. We have, as an example, supply network planning. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that. The top toolbar, there's an icon up there called Properties. So this is going to give me information about supply network planning. So I'll highlight that. If you notice here, we have a full definition or description. Okay, we come down, we have some additional attributes. ARIS maintains some standard attributes that tell us a little bit about the object. Not overly important today. The one thing here, all objects in the supply chain reference database have a framework number. So this is the framework number, BP016. It's on the object up here. And then we have an indicator on here that tells us the type of practice. So this is an emerging practice. If I highlight this one here, it'll say standard practice. Okay? The other thing is we create relationships in a repository. So I'm going to come up here and look at related objects. If I want to understand what other processes this particular practice is used in, okay, this is essentially telling me I have 3 processes, one of which is the planned supply chain here, and then I have the 2 others. If I want to look at what models they occur in, I can look at occurrences, okay, and I note that it's used in E7, Managed Supply Chain Network, and P1.1. Okay, I can navigate to the other models by clicking on the link. Okay, and so now I see I'm on E7 Managed Supply Chain Network. Here's my practice. Here's the process, okay, and the relationship. And then I can navigate back, which I'll do. Okay, all right. Similarly, excuse me. Now, let me go back up to the sorry about that. Okay. If I come over here and I look at the metric, okay, I have planning labor cost. Okay, that planning labor cost has a description. Okay, it also has a framework number and a couple other attributes that we'll talk about when we look at the metrics. Okay, we can also look at what other processes this particular metric measures. Okay, and I can look at what we call the related objects, and it measures a couple of other processes here. Okay, and we can also look at the occurrences. Okay, and that would be the other processes here. Okay, each of these are links where you can navigate to the model. Okay, let's back up and let's go up to the process model or the value chain model. So I'm going to come in here. This is one of the features of ARIS Connect. Okay, I can look at a process model in more of a tabular or textual view. So this planned supply chain has 4 level 3 processes: P1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Each one of these has a link to that detailed model that shows the practices and the metrics, and this will actually have the skills and the inputs outputs. So this is actually a link that I can navigate to. But let's open the model. Okay, so this is the process flow model at level 3, and I have P1.1 and 1.2 are basically predecessors of 1.3, which is a predecessor of 1.4. Okay, this particular object here is the level 3 process. Okay, I can actually navigate off of this, and we can get into that model that describes the inputs and outputs. So once again, I have my practices. Okay, I have my metrics. Okay, and now we're going to introduce 2 other objects here. We have our skills, and so I have customer relationship management and demand management, and I also have my process inputs and outputs. So these are the process inputs and the output. Okay, so let's take a look at demand management again. We'll come up and look at the properties. We have a description, and I have a framework number again, and I can look at other processes that this particular skill is required for. If I scroll down here, I can see those 3 other processes. I can also look at the occurrences. So this skill is used in 1.3 and 2.1. And similar, I can navigate to 1.3. Okay, and if you notice, here's the particular skill used in 1.3. All right, so let me navigate back over to 1.1. I'll shut this window down. Okay, here's the output. Okay, so we have an output called supply chain requirements. Look at the properties of this, and I can look at the related objects again. So this says it's basically an output of P1.1, which is this, and it's read by, or an input by, this process. So the same thing, I can I can navigate back over. So what I did was I clicked on it, and this is actually the description of that process. Okay. Before we leave the process, let me go over to the other frameworks. Okay, so this is the level 2 framework. Okay, so we have, I'll shrink the model down for a second. Okay, we have plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable, which are the level 1 processes. And then I have my level 2s. Okay, so this is showing P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. Each one of these have assignment icons, so you can actually access the model content, okay, directly off of these objects also. So you can navigate based on the framework. If I go to level 3, okay, same model. We just introduced the level 3s. So as an example, P1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. So when you're developing processes, these would be the objects that you would attach your detailed process models off of this level here, your P1.1s. Okay, let's go back to the main navigation model, and we'll look at the performance dimension. So we have the 5 performance dimensions here. We'll take a look at cost. Okay, I have multiple models here, or diagrams. Okay, they're basically just breakdowns of the high-level ones. So let me open up the total cost to serve metrics. Okay, and I'll scroll over just so you get an idea of the model. Okay, so this is a model that has a level 1 total cost to serve. We have 8 level 2s. Okay, and then each of the level 2 metrics have corresponding level 3s. So if I look at the planning cost and look at the properties, okay, I have a definition or description. Okay, I have the framework number that tells me it's a cost metric. It's a level 2, and it's essentially just a sequence number. I also have a performance category. So the performance category here is the CO cost, and it tells me the level of the metric. It's a level 2. All right, and if I look at planning labor cost, same thing. I have a very detailed definition or description. Okay, notice now it's a level 3 metric. Okay, and I can also look at if I wanted to understand where this metric was used in what process, right? I could look at the occurrences of it, and I see that it's used on E4 and P1, P2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and you can navigate, I won't do it right now, but you can navigate to that model by clicking on the link. Okay, so each of the performance metrics have a similar structure, so the agility, the asset management, the reliability, and responsiveness. Okay, let's go back to the overview model again. The next dimension here, the practices. We have 3 different types. We have a best practice, emerging practice, and standard practice. Okay, if I open up the associated diagram here, this is what we would call an inventory model. This is essentially just a catalog model of all of the practices, best practices. Once again, we can take a look at an individual practice here. I can look at the the attributes of it. A very detailed full description is in the repository. Okay, once again, the type of practice, it's a best practice. And the cross-reference again to other processes. So I can look at related objects, right? It's used in this identify, prioritize, aggregate SC requirements, which is this P1.1 process. Okay, let's go back to the supply chain reference model. Okay, the next dimension is the people. Okay, so we have the skills, and then we have the supporting training, aptitudes, and experiences for those skills. So with the training, if I open this, this is an inventory model of the trainings. Okay. Let me just navigate back up to the what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into this is the skills inventory model. So each of the skills here require a set of trainings, aptitudes, and experiences. Okay, let's take a look at this demand management. Okay, so we have demand management here. These are, each one of these objects here or symbols is associated with a particular model which is in this navigation structure, so I can access it by either clicking on the object here, or I could actually get it here. Okay. So I have my aptitudes, my trainings, and my experiences. So we'll take a look at the legend. All of the models in ARIS here have legends. Okay, so these are the experiences. We have the aptitudes and the trainings. This is the skill. Okay, so we have the relationship. Let's take a look at a particular training. We can look at APICS CPIM here. Okay, and I'll look at, so if I'm interested to understand what other skills, okay, are associated with that particular training, okay, we can look at the related objects. And if you notice here, there's a very long list of skills here, okay? And I can also look at, if we wanted to, we could look at the occurrences. So these would be the individual models, okay, where that particular training is used. One of the other features that we have is we have built a set of matrix models. So this is SCOR skill to training. Okay, if I open up the matrix model here, okay, and let me blow it up a little bit so you have the ability to look at it. So the rows have the skills on it. Okay, these are all of those skills, all 150, 160 of them. The trainings are in the columns. And if we look at, let's look at APICS CPIM here. Okay, and if I just scroll down, you'll see the R's in on the skill rows, right? So this basically is a matrix telling me that this particular skill requires this training. Okay, I can also pull up the occurrences, the related objects, and I'm getting the same information. Okay, so this model is actually generated from the relationships that were built on the other models. It's a generated model. Okay, I can also look at skill to process. Let me shut this window down a little bit. Okay, so this is skill to process. And if you notice here, I have my process hierarchy on the rows. Okay, and my skills going across the top, and I can just select one here. And you looking at the R's. So this particular process requires this skill. And once again, I can look at the occurrences or the related objects and identify those processes here that that are impacted or require that skill. Okay. There's other matrix models that are out there. We built some for the performance. So here's the cost metrics. We have the matrix model here. Okay, same idea. I'll blow it up here for a second. But this is the SCOR process again, and then the metrics. All right, so this is the cost metric. And so this particular cost metric measures this process. Okay. A couple other features that are also included. We have developed a report. So this is an Excel spreadsheet. You can run an Excel formatted report on each of the matrix models. So this is the skill to process. If you notice here, each of the rows have the process and the framework ID is included there. So it's an option on the report to include it. Okay. The other thing is there's a report that's included off of this top level model here. So this is the main structure model here, and we can run a report. So within Connect, there's the ability to run reports. So there's a report called APICS SCOR Process Framework Manual. This report can be produced either in as a PDF or as a document. And you start the report and it'll run for a minute or two, and then we get a nice PDF out the back end. Okay, so this is a PDF. It's about 600 and some pages long. It essentially documents all of the models, all of the relationships between each of the 4 dimensions. Okay, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like here. It's a table of contents. It's actually a really nice report formatted. Table of contents, okay, and as I said, it's 600 pages. And then if I go back up to, let's look at P1.1 again here. So this is P1.1. This is the process, the framework number. There's a definition or description of the process. These are the performance metrics used. Each of the best practices are listed that are on in the model with a description. And if I scroll down, okay, the skills that are used, so demand management and CRM with their definitions, and then the inputs and outputs. Okay, so these are the 3 inputs, the 1 output, and then the other processes that are impacted, so the cross-reference. Okay, all right. So that's an overview. Hopefully you found it interesting. And Peter, I'll pass it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Harry. We are excited about this launch. I just want a couple things just to comment on, and then we'll turn it over to some questions. We are, as part of this, introducing at our international conference next week a special focus forum of people that are looking to develop our library of what I call our SCOR level 4 processes. And so I've been doing SCOR work a long time, and as most of you know that have done any implementation work, you know that in order to use SCOR in an implementation framework, you got to develop out the level 4s. And so we're looking at this focus forum to both help us identify things that we can do better with this tool and things we can do better with the model, but also be able to build out that library by industry and by platform potentially. The other thing I want to mention is we are, for those of you that don't know, SCOR is 20 years old in November. And so I know APICS is looking forward to, as part of the APICS Supply Chain Council, introducing a SCOR 12.0 development plan. And we kind of sequenced that with the launch of the APICS Dictionary, which is this conference. So we're looking forward to that. And then the last one, which is the next slide, is as part of our APICS family, we are trying to map, which will work its way back into the SCOR 12.0. But for those of you that are APICS certified, we're trying to map course, module, and session to SCOR level 2 and 3. This is just a partial list of the processes. For those of you that have corporate memberships with the APICS Supply Chain Council, this spreadsheet, this entire spreadsheet, is available in our digital library. So with that, I just wanted to say to learn more about our APICS for Business platform, I have a great colleague that will be able to tell you all about that, Carolyn Lawrence. And for those of you that are interested in taking a more customized demonstration of the ARIS tool set, the SCOR 11 BPM Accelerator, please feel free to contact Harry directly. And with that, I think, Melinda, I'm going to pass it back to you to facilitate our Q&A session.
Thank you, Peter. I think the number one thing that's on everyone's minds here, because that's what's coming through the most in these comments, is okay, how can I take this tool and map my own supply chain process? So how can you customize the accelerator to map your own supply chain, like your own?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest question. If you have a quick answer to that or a demonstration of that.
I will. So let me take a first shot at it, Harry, and then if you want to be thinking about your response. Every company, so I've had the opportunity to do about 150 projects with cross industries, cross continents. And when you implement SCOR, you always start with the basic level 1, 2, and 3, and then you adapt for the best practices for your industry, and you adapt for the system platform that you're on, SAP, Oracle, or whatever. So we see most of the mapping that makes a difference in your company at level 4. And that's part of the reason why we want to start developing a standard level 4 set of processes that you can pick and choose from. At SCOR level 5, companies who have really gone the distance on this one then are actually then putting together a configuration script or a language, that would describe, here's how we enable this particular functionality in this particular SCOR process. And so if you did the best of the best companies that have used SCOR, they've actually migrated down to a level 5 level of detail. 4 and 5, to answer the question directly, typically be where you develop your own stuff. And the BPM Accelerator has the capacity to be able to create your own models using I'll call it the 1, 2, and 3 platform. Harry, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, you're right on there. So it's really the content that you develop at the level 3 and below is where the processes are. So in ARIS, there's a couple different process model types. If you're a BPMN shop, or ARIS has a model type called an event-driven process chain, EPC, but both of them are process models, and that's where you would develop your business process flow and then associate it with that level 3 object. So you can link it to that level 3 object and navigate the same way I was navigating today. So I can navigate down to that process, and then I can also chain my level 3 processes and create more of an end-to-end flow across the process hierarchy.
The other thing I want to mention is one of the reasons why, when we were looking for a strategic partner in the ARIS platform and DEA in particular, is to know that we have a lot of folks that are looking to attach a more advanced process management tool as part of their workflow into their ERP systems. And so again, that was one of the reasons why we picked this platform to start with. Next question.
Okay, thank
Linda.
you. Thank you both. And here is somebody, and probably this is on a lot of people's, can this replace the book?
Oh, I don't know. The book has a lot of great flop factor, right? I mean, so you can really put that on a desk and it makes an impact. I would say right now today we're trying to, as part of APICS digital strategies, think digital first. And so we've got the PDF download, we've got the book itself, we've got an online version, HTML version that I know a lot of our faculty partners that use that. This becomes an important advanced tool for a lot of reasons, but one of which was the workflow connection. And so I would suggest that this tool is not intended to replace the book, but it certainly, as you think about global process governance and being able to manage your processes globally, this is certainly the tool of choice. I don't know, Harry, do you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, Peter, I mean, we built this this database based on the PDF, right? So everything that was in that PDF is in this database in terms of all of the objects, or each of the object types, the process metrics and so forth, and then all of the descriptions and attributions of those objects. So there were, so and that report that I showed at the end is essentially a document, a PDF document of the SCOR 11 framework. I mean, it's all encompassing. So.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, this is another kind of how you customize it kind of thing, which seems to be a theme here. So even if if we're not talking about building our own supply chain, modeling our own supply chain, but how do you, for example, pick out the best practices that you want or you're using? I mean, can you do that with this? Can you pull out just the parts that you want to use, the practices you want to use, the processes you're using, that kind of thing? Can you customize it that way?
So I'm going to answer part of it as it relates to what is your motivation. So the most important thing for your company is that you're using SCOR to improve something, as opposed to an individual that says, hey, I just want to map out my processes. So if your motivation is somewhere in these top 6 and you have a metric objective as a result of that, then you have to engage with the right business team. You have to define the appropriate supply chain that you're going to work on. You need to do some analysis that says, here's how I perform, here's how my people are doing, here's how my processes are working, and here's my practices that I'm using. It's in this step 3 that you identify from a business point of view what are the critical practices that you need to be able to implement. How mature are you on those practices along the way? And then part of your implementation, is how do I get better? And so I think it's in step 3 of the implementation where you actually have to go through the analytical approach of picking the practices that are going to help you in your business. And I think the tool facilitates that. And then at the end you hit print, and here's your customized blueprint for that particular supply chain in your organization. Harry, any additional comments?
Yeah, I mean, from a process framework perspective, you have your 3-level process framework. So, I mean, any particular area that was not in scope for you can be taken out of scope from a tool perspective, and then processes can be also substituted. So the framework is basically a structure that can be adapted based on your requirements.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
This is kind of I think this is actually more of a SCOR question, but I'll ask this. Are best practices provided based on industry as part of the accelerator tool? So I think he's really asking where the best practices came from, or what's considered what makes a best practice.
So I think when we go through each phase, I've been through 11 phases of the SCOR model development, and I think its practices emerge from users. And so I think the most important thing is to get the user community together and talk about some of the practices that they're employing, and then how might the SCOR framework either support, define, or redefine them. So the most important thing is the input coming from the user community. So that's number 1. I think then there's a definitional thing, and there is some lag because we're a volunteer community, but you know, what makes a best practice, what's emerging, and what's as a standard one. So, and I think when you look at something in emerging that you think should be best or standard, I think that's just a matter of lag time in terms of model update. And I wouldn't get too bent out of shape for that. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking to update our SCOR framework as it relates to analytics, digital supply chain, omni-channel. There's a number of topics that are on the list as we start to contemplate SCOR 12.0.
Yes, thank you. So here's somebody that obviously has been to a SCOR training. How does the tool align with the racetrack? And maybe since there's people here that don't know what the racetrack is, we first need to explain. Yeah, there you go.
So good question. And so I think there's two questions. And the one is, what is SCOR? And I think that's the idea of, you know, SCOR is, you know, the integrated processes of plan, source, make, deliver, and return. I think there's that question. That's I call it the noun part of SCOR. And then there's the other one, which is 2 days of the 3-day class that says, well, how do people use it? And so when we looked at, you know, the best of the best people that have, organizations that have used SCOR in the past, they seem to go through 5 steps to get the maximum return on that. And so this is a more summary version of the racetrack that you learned in the SCOR P class. I'll call it, this has been summarized for executive view, but it's the same thing. How do I engage? How do I define a project scope? How do I analyze all the dimensions of my supply chain? How do I put a list of things together that will improve? And then how do I launch? And I think the BPM Accelerator has 2 functions. One is it can document your analysis as you go, but I think there's another center of excellence application that says, okay, if one of my projects is global management of S&OP, then I think the tool becomes an enduring implementation tool that says, well, how do I put in governance, policy, process, role definition across all of my business units for S&OP, P1, plan supply chain, and then how do I then ultimately link that from a workflow management standpoint to the tools that I'm using to do demand planning and supply planning. I think that's the 2 dimensions, how to document a project and then how to use the BPM Accelerator to actually implement global process management.
Okay, great. Okay, I've got a couple of just questions about the software itself, such as how can I get the SCOR add-on for ARIS? Like, how can they get it? And how much does it cost, kind of thing? Do you want to cover that here, or?
So let's talk about how to get it. So I'll come back to this one. I think to talk about how to get it, we can. It's going to be through Carolyn Lawrence initially. Today is what we're calling our soft launch day. And then we can review kind of the pricing. We have pricing available for companies who already have an affiliation with the APICS Supply Chain Council, but we're also making this product available to companies who do not. And so that will be a conversation that Carolyn can have with you as you're looking at it. If you're saying, yeah, this looks like a good thing, but I really want to look at the tool and I want to be able to have a demonstration of the tool, you know, and share this with other key stakeholders within my organization, then straight away give Harry a call. Harry, would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from a pure mechanics standpoint, from an ARIS perspective, you know, obviously you need an ARIS installed on a server, and once we have ARIS up and running, then this is basically a database backup and a restore. So it's a SCOR database, and it's a restore of that database onto an ARIS platform. There's a couple reports, as I mentioned, so it's an import of 2 reports, a filter, and the database. And you know, based on that, we would provide an electronic transfer of that content to a customer.
Okay, great. I think that was what they were looking for. Okay, simpler question. if I just want to build a level 2 thread diagram, can I do that?
Good question. So I go back to thread diagrams as being that magical combination of the level 2 processes across the trading partner network, which is this one.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Harry take a shot at that one, and then I'll think about that.
Yeah, I mean, so if I understand what you're getting at there, Peter, it's basically a relationship of process to organization there, level 2 process to organization. So
right. If you look at this one, you would have organizations across the bottom, and then you would have level 2 processes connecting as preceding and superseding each other going across the map.
Yeah, so it's more of an end-to-end view of level 2 process with organization tied to it, and that's, yeah, it's very doable in ARIS. Not an issue.
Melinda, we got time for one more question.
Okay. Will this be used as a supporting tool in the upcoming and future SCOR P classes?
So that is a great question. So we have between the SCOR app, the actual binder that you get, the online SCOR, and the PDF, I think for the SCOR P class, we have enough references on what SCOR is. This tool is really aimed at organizations that are really taking process management to the next step. So this is not intended to just be an automated reference. Now it's very effective at that, but this is really for companies that are looking to have enterprise-wide access and management of their supply chain processes using SCOR as a feature. Harry, would you agree or disagree?
No, I mean, I don't have any further comment, Peter, but yeah, I would assume so. Yep.
Yep. Okay, Melinda, we wrap up?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And I think there are a couple of questions we didn't get to, but we will make sure all of those are answered via email so that you have answers to all of your questions. And again, if you are interested in a demonstration or have further questions, you have the contacts there in the presentation to reach. And please do. We want to make sure all your questions are answered, and look forward to sharing this new product with everybody. So thank you all for attending today. Have a good evening, morning, or night, depending on where you are. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yep.